Does he come out to start?
Absolutely forever.
Alrighty.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead and get this started. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me today because Eric is out at doing conferences. You know, where's that place? Creed. Yeah. Creed Hardman. Yes. So he's getting a whole lot of it. They seem to be having a blast out there. So last week he asked me to pick up on his class, and I was excited to, but you're going to be stuck with me today, for better or for worse. I'm not as funny as Eric. We're going to continue on with attributes of God. You're going to hear me a lot of the times. I refer just from habit and from study of Yahweh, because that's biblical, right? That's what I am. And I get a lot of questions like, "Oh, why do you say it that way?" Especially people at work. It's like, well, that's the only time that I found so far that's when he tells us his name. That's what he says. He uses his name. That's my own personal. That's all. That's what I'll be saying. You know, I'm sure that God knows his name in any other form, shape that you want to call him. You know, the Hebrews, Elohim, Adonai, everything like that. They all had names of affection for him. We're going to continue on with omnipotence. Now, of all the attributes and stuff, omnipotence is one of those that you could either probably spend a long time talking about or sum it up in one thing. Because what does omnipotence mean? All powerful. And if there's not a better way to describe our God, it's all powerful. Why is he all powerful?
Because he's God.
He's God, right? He's Yahweh. He's the creator.
Be around.
Everything we see and touch and be around and feel is all his. He created it. He had a hand in it. This is his design. Yes. Yes, ma'am. He holds it all together.
Yep, that's his to do away with. Exactly.
Yeah, it's his to do away with.
We'll talk more
Exactly.
about what we think.
We'll talk more about what we think sometimes, how we feel about his plan,
God's opinion about our feelings about his plan.
what God's opinion about our feelings about his plan.
So all powerful. It's not like
So all powerful.
say.
It's not like what we do. Like if say that we want to go to if I want to go to the gym and I have a goal, I want to bench 225. That means I got to do a lot of work. I got to eat the right food. I got to exercise. I got to go to the gym. I got to do a lot of stuff. I got to stay away from sweets, soda, all that stuff that I do already. Yahweh's not that way. He has all his power. He's always had all his power. I think what we talked about last time, he's eternal. He had no beginning, no end. He's just always been there. We are. It's hard for us to understand that because in our human brains we don't think about stuff that way. There has to be a beginning in our brain. There has to be an end. Stuff that when I talk to my kids about eating the right food, like hey, you have to eat broccoli. You can't just eat cake 14 times a day or granola bars, because if you do, you get diabetes, you get sick, and all that. Like so, you have to do. For us, there are ends to a means. I have to do this thing to have this thing happen. Yahweh doesn't abide by that because he's eternal. The book that Eric let me borrow and the pamphlets and stuff, I'm going in and out of his notes, and the notes are obviously scripture as well. And it's a really good read. Talks about how Yahweh doesn't have any limitations, and we can see that on the very beginning of creation, all this stuff. Have you ever had a chance to go and see the world, mountains, ocean depths and stuff like that? It's hard for us to put that, to fathom that. Does anybody know how deep the Mariana Trench is?
7 or 8 miles. And then
7 or 8 miles, and then what's the tallest mountain? Everest. It's like 6 or 7 miles tall, and they're like, oh yeah, 6 or 7 miles, that's not bad. And like, oh. Yeah, that's a lot. In altitude, that's a lot. And not to mention, if anybody were to climb Mount Everest, you have to use oxygen, they have to train, all that stuff. But in a blink, in a matter of nanosecond, Yahweh just created it. Like, you know what? I want this. That's hard for me to understand.
So I like to point out that he doesn't have limitations.
So I like to point out that he doesn't have limitations because he's the one that sets the limitations.
Job 14:5.
Everything here is his.
He talks about
Job 14:5. He talks about Job is talking, conversation with Yahweh. It says, a person's days are determined. You have decreed the number of his months and have set limits he cannot exceed. Yahweh is the one that sets the limits. He's the one that sets the numbers. He doesn't have to abide by that because they're his limits. And if I keep going back on saying the same point over and over again, for me it's just hard to explain omnipotence without, like, it's all powerful. That's what it is. It's hard to just keep re-explaining.
The writer in this book talks about he
does a really good job of describing 3 different ways that we can see Yahweh's power: cosmic, corporate, and personal. Cosmic, the first sentence of the Bible, Gen 1:1. What is that? In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. So you just start Scripture with His power. In the beginning, Yahweh, in His great mind, decided, you know what, I want creation. So He created everything. The one thing I like to point out too is that He created everything out of nothing. In His plan, His will. Now, my wife is an excellent cook, an excellent baker, but she'll tell you herself that she has this knowledge from God. That she knows that she's gotten to listen to her grandparents, her mom, cookbooks, and everything handed down, and she glory to God. You know, if you ever tasted my wife's cooking, you're like, man, that's pretty good. That's not just by chance. It's good. I may just be biased a little bit, but she will still tell you that she has taken already pre-existing ingredients. You know, she didn't create the egg. She didn't create the flour. She didn't create the wheat. God created it. Yahweh created it. Same thing with an artist. You can make a masterpiece like the Mona Lisa. Like, yeah, there was a beautiful mind that made that. Yahweh created the mind, created the paints, created the oils. With me, when I go do like camping stuff, it's a big thing. If you've ever been really cold, today would be an awful day to be out trying to survive this stuff. But if you've ever been really cold and you make a fire, that's why every time I teach somebody, it's like, even if it's like 98 degrees, I'm making a fire because that does a lot for your mental. Like, I made a fire. I did something today. I can see that I did something. I'm still borrowing. I'm still borrowing creation. I'm still borrowing his lighter, his wood. I'm borrowing stuff that he created. Energy, yes, ma'am. The food that I ate to be able to make that fire, everything that we have is from him. In Job, I'll talk about Job a lot, especially with, you know, Job gets to have a nice conversation with Yahweh about creation.
Job did a really good job.
The story that Job did a really good job of trying to honor God. And I think any of us in that situation would have questions. Not question the Almighty, but have questions like, big question, why me? What did I do? And his friends did not do the best. They were not good friends to be around with that. So when Yahweh starts talking to him in Job 38:4-7, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footing set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Where were you? I don't want to have that conversation. If anybody's ever tried, I am not the best at carpentry. If anybody's ever tried to build like a house or a thing or a shed, with me, I'm so ADHD that I have to measure about 14 times, and then when I go to cut, I got to cut. But it's mind-boggling to me of the power that the Almighty has, just to be like, set everything perfectly the way it needed to be. And especially if we're talking about the beginning of time, the way that He made the garden, everything perfect. He made man, you're going to fit perfectly into this spot. You can do what I say, everything will be great. And then we decided to put our own 2 cents into it, and we see how that turns out. Jeremiah 32:27.
Yahweh says, I am God of all mankind.
Yahweh says, I am the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? Jeremiah 32:27. I am the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? I like that part where it says of all mankind. Not just, we know that the Israelites were chosen, right? We know that. It says it multiple times. But He's the God of all mankind, and the vast majority of mankind decides to turn their back against Him. But He's still our God. Still always there. The only God. Yes, ma'am.
It's hard to truly understand creation.
It's hard to truly understand creation or creating or truly understand something if you've never experienced it. You can have sympathy, absolutely. Sympathy is something you can be empathetic. I will never understand what it's like to birth a child. As a medic and as someone that's been around that, I can have it. I guess, sure, I can kind of like understand what you're going through, but I can't truly understand it. Somebody that's lost a parent, I can sympathize. I haven't gone through that yet. Somebody that's been through some combat.
I've been through combat.
In Vietnam. I've been through combat, but I didn't go through what you guys
We
do.
do our best to try to understand each other.
So we can do our best to try to understand each other. And so that's when trying to learn Yahweh's omnipotence, I have no frame of reference for that. I can try to understand just like
Basically, we limit Yahweh's
Yep.
power.
So basically, we limit Yahweh's power versus what we are. Yes, our perception. Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about not being able to comprehend.
Talking about not being able to comprehend something. Who's our electrician here? I know Jeremy's not here. Anybody work with electricity?
What's the
doing anything?
highest thing, highest like wattage you use?
What's the highest like wattage you
500
use?
kilovolts?
Okay,
That's more.
500
I
kilovolts.
am.
That's a lot. That's more. I am. I am
I'm really good at letting all the magic
illiterate
smoke
when
out.
it comes to electricity. I'm really good at letting all the magic smoke out, but
I asked
when it
that
comes to anything
because
else, I can't do it.
How many watts?
And I ask that because how many watts do you think the sun puts out?
3.86
I had to look it up.
quadrillion trillion watts.
3.86 quadrillion trillion watts. That's the amount of energy that we attribute to the sun. And
Yep, there you go.
Yahweh just
That's
agreed
exactly
that.
what you need.
Yep, there you go. That's exactly what you need. And for it to be in the exact position it needs to be, if it was too far away or too close, too far away, we'd all freeze to death. Too close, we'd all burn up. And that just happened to be an accident in some people's worldviews. But for that to just happen to be there, that we went through Genesis not too long ago, and we know that Yahweh created this place for a reason. Everything has his purpose behind it. No matter how much we try to mess it up and put our own little helping hand into it.
So how did creation happen? How do we know?
So how did creation happen? How do we know that creation happened according to Scripture?
He didn't take
He spoke it into existence.
like, oh, okay,
Right?
I'm gonna do some of
He
this.
didn't take pre-existing things like, oh, okay, I'm going to use some of this. I'm using no. He spoke it and it became.
All powerful.
That's
Just,
again
you know what? I
all
decided.
powerful.
That'd be like me
Of
saying,
just you know what I've decided. That'd be like me just saying I want a cheeseburger and a cheeseburger pops up. It ain't gonna happen, but that's a little bit of what
Hebrews
Yahweh
11:3
can do.
says,
Hebrews
"By
11:3
faith we understand that the universe
says,
was
"By
formed
faith
by
we
God's
understand
command,
that the
so
universe
what
was
is seen
formed
not
at
made
God's
out of
command,
man's
so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. What was
That
visible.
Scripture tells us.
So that in Scripture tells us
Something out
that
of nothing.
He made
So we can't boast and
something
like,
out of
no,
nothing.
he took some of this. He
So
made
we
out
can't
of that.
boast and
Like,
like, oh well,
that
no,
makes
he
sense.
took some of this and he made out of that, and like, oh, that makes sense to me. No, it doesn't make sense to me. If you completely understand how he can do that, I would love to have a conversation with you because I don't understand. Just by the fact of just putting faith in God and God said it, so it works. That's what I believe how that works.
At the cosmic level, that's how we see something.
That at the cosmic level, that's how we see something. That's how our interpretation of his power works. Does anybody else have any other ways that cosmically we can see his power? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to know some perspective law. It says that in the area, no matter where we're at, the area from the earth to the sun is the biggest.
So it makes like a triangle of the same space.
Huh. So it makes like a triangle of like the same space?
Yeah. It's either further or closer to the sun.
Oh, wow.
Because we're on the north pole. Like the ellipse.
That's
Yeah.
where
That's really cool.
some people will shy
That's
away.
where some people will shy away from like science and stuff. And, like you've ever heard Jeremy speak. Like science explains God. Cool. Helps explain. Helps us a little bit more
We don't
understand.
understand everything.
So we don't understand everything. That's absolutely sure, for sure. And we're not going to understand everything because that's Yahweh's secrets to keep, to give. But as we get more and more people will start to study more and have better science, it's weird how it all points down. My wife and I will go to the Science Museum, and they have a really cool, what's the one where you see all the stars? Planetary. So you go through, they have all the videos, and it's really cool. You see all the stars, and it pulls back, and they'll go further and further back to different planets. And her and I always laugh at each other. We kind of look at each other every time because there's a section you pull back. There's something called the Great Attractor. They can't explain it. It's something way off in the distance. It's, we're all way zoomed out of the space that everything is pulled and connected by this one thing. They don't know why. They don't know what it is. They just call it the Great Attractor. I have an idea. But that's just funny to me that science tries to God doesn't exist. But there's this really cool thing that keeps the whole universe together. Yeah, that's God. So corporate level, we see Yahweh's power, corporate level, with a group of people. That's what his verb he uses. What is one instance that we can see Yahweh uses power with a group of people?
Israelites, right? What's the first instance?
What's that? Israelites, right? What's the first instance we see when he? Through Moses, Yahweh uses his power to open the Red Sea to save millions of Israelites. When I was going through, it's like that was definitely, that's one of the ways that he shows us with and then if you look at the plagues, that's definitely a use of power. And as you read through the Old Testament, he'll continually go back. And that's kind of like a cornerstone. Did you not know the power that I used? Did you not know, I saved your people? So he uses the plagues and freeing the Israelites as a show of power, what he's capable of, a fraction of what he shows us what he's capable of. Exodus 3:19 through 20. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I perform among them. After that, he will let you go. Now, you may not have heard it. I hear it all the time when I talk about God and work people. Well, how can the God of the New Testament be the God of the Old Testament? Well, that's because you're relying on your own understanding of what God should do. I was not there, especially when they talk about like different tribes. He always says to eliminate all these people in that tribes. I cannot begin to understand his plans. I don't want to be there to try to understand his plans. That's not up to me. But what he did show us, he told us what he was going to do, is that he used his powers, and we know some of the plagues that he used. In Exodus 9:16, but I have raised you for this very purpose, raised you up for this very purpose, that I might show you my power, that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. Yahweh's not a boastful God. He doesn't go like, look at me, I'm so powerful. No, he knows that we are forgetful people. We see that with the Israelites. The first 40 days being in the desert, we forget really fast. We forget our blessings really, really fast. We don't forget when somebody wrongs us. When somebody, cuts us off in traffic, we remember that for months. I was a red Prius that just slammed on its brakes. But we don't remember when somebody, like, hey, somebody bought my coffee today. We forget that real fast.
There's a really interesting study about the plagues.
There's a really interesting study about the plagues, and that could be a whole thing in itself. But if you look at some of the gods that the Egyptians worship, lowercase gods, that Yahweh's plagues, they have attributed to essentially killing their false idols, their false gods. No, they worship the Nile, because the Nile was their life source and everything, so Yahweh turned it into blood. They worship the sun, with the sun god Ra. They blocked out the sun, made it darkness. And then there's the one of the fertility. So with that, yeah, the frogs and the gnats and stuff. So basically, Yahweh was showing them. He could have made the plagues any way he wanted to, but he was showing them how false they were and showing the Israelites that he was the one true God. And again, us as people have a very short memory. Like they were all ecstatic, all happy, open the Red Sea, crawl through there. I'm hungry. I'm tired. Where's me? Where's this? They wanted to go back to slavery. And it's really easy for me to look at that. Man, how could you do that? But next day, I'm the same exact way. I have a nice meal in the morning or at lunch. Man, I'm hungry. I need more food. Like, wow, I have memory of a goldfish. Another one of my favorite stories is about Yahweh helping their group is Gideon. When the Midianites, they were going to wipe out the Israelites, and it said they had so many soldiers, the army was so vast you couldn't count them. So many camels that it was like the grains of sand. I don't know if you've ever actually had to look at an army like that or a force. That is terrifying to me. When Midian, being a good leader, in the book of Judges, that he wanted to amass an army. Okay, we have this huge army. We need to get as many people as we can. That makes sense in our brain. If I have 10 people that want to fight me, I'm probably not going to fight them by myself. I'm going to at least get 10. Or U.S. military, we like to double that. I'm going to get 50. So Gideon was acting according to his own brain, acting like a man would in mankind, and Yahweh told him, no, that's too many people. So ended up dwindling down until Gideon had 300 people. Can you imagine? The boys and I, we watch the show Superbook. Everybody's ever seen it. It's a cartoon. We love it. They take the kids back in time to actually get to let them in the Bible and stuff like that, and it shows the stories. And one we just watched was Gideon, and has the 300 Israelites. Are you serious? Yahweh wants us to go fight all these guys? Like, what are we going to do? So Gideon listened to the Lord, and
Judges 7:2.
so I don't lose my Judges 7:2.
You have too many men.
The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel will boast against me. My own strength has saved me." Yahweh knows our hearts. If Israel took to fight 2 Midian with a huge army and they won, look what we did. Look what I did. I did all this. Yahweh knew that was going to happen. That's how we are. Nope, 300 people. And without actually fight, if you know the story of Gideon, he split them up into 3 different companies, 100 people, surrounded the encampment, and made all kinds of noise, broke pots and everything, and so it scared the Midian army so much that they started infighting, started killing themselves. Essentially, they defeated themselves. So Yahweh, through his power, defeated an entire army without the Israelites actually ever having to get in a fight. For the military members here, if you had to explain those tactics to somebody in a general, somebody like, go sit down and color. Just don't worry. Don't let the adults talk. But again, that's relying on our own thoughts and our own power.
Does anybody have any other?
Again, the Bible is full of examples of Yahweh's power. Does anybody any other one that sticks out to them? Elijah and the priest of Baal. That one is a fantastic. I love it too because it's like it shows Elijah just talking. Maybe he's asleep. Surely he's a god. Maybe he's in the bathroom. Yeah. But so Ahab and Jezebel, they start wanting people to worship Baal, and Elijah tells Ahab, "All right, get all the Baal prophets, get all of them. Let's see if you can call your God, and then I'll call my God." So he tells them to create this huge pyre and get the sacrifices, and they they do all this chanting, and then Elijah essentially just taunts them the entire time. Where's Baal? Surely he's a god. Maybe he's sleeping. Shout louder. Just completely just destroying them. It would be like an internet troll, somebody on Facebook just talking crud to us all the time. And I find that hilarious. So when they find out, like, okay, then Ahab's like, all right, well, you try your God. So Elijah builds, places a sacrifice, built an altar, and soaks it 3 times, completely dripping wet with water. And there was, what's that? Yeah, with a trench just completely soaked. In our comprehension, there's no way, I can tell you this is a guy that starts a lot of fires, there's no way that would work. Soaking wet wood, no, would not work. But that's relying on my own power, not Yahweh's power. Elijah talks to the Lord sends down a pillar of fire, burns everything out. Just everything out. Water, yep. Burns everything out. Water, the altar, everything's gone. And then Elijah, when he asks the Lord to do that to show who the true God is. And
it's hard for me sometimes when you see those things.
It's hard for me sometimes when you see those things. You can take it out of context and be like, oh, well, that's testing the Lord. No, it's not. Elijah is with the Lord. Elijah speaks with the Lord. The Lord knew. He knows everything. The Lord knew. Used Elijah to help him to show the others.
Now we can get to more of a personal level.
Now we can get to more of a personal level. How has Yahweh showed us His power at a personal level? Our children, yeah, we can definitely see if you see your children born with. That's definitely you can feel that.
Everyday life, right? If you look and you see like there's that adage.
Everyday life, right? If you look and you see like there's that adage like seek the good, find the good. I would go a step further that's God. God can only be good, right? So you can see the good things in your life. It's simple the other day at work. Everything I was doing at work was just going perfect, which is not like me. I am the clumsiest person. Everything. I have no idea why I'm a mechanic because I disdain working on airplanes. But I work on airplanes. But everything was going perfect. Every bolt I had to put in, every pin, everything was fantastic. And I was working with a buddy, and he probably thought I was losing my mind because every time something would go great, I said, "Thank you, God." Every single time. It's like that's not me. I know my skills. That's not my skills. So everyday life, absolutely. In Scripture, we see that Yahweh has used prophets and apostles for personal miracles and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And then Jesus.
You can't tell me that he wasn't.
Absolutely, Jesus was. You can't tell me that he wasn't a personal. He was 100% man, 100% God, and you can feel and see the love of Christ just even reading on a page. The way that he talked to people, the way that he interacted, the way that people followed him. You can absolutely see that, and doesn't even stop at Scripture. You can see the love, especially in this church. I always brag to all of my friends and to everybody I talk to when I'm trying to talk about faith is the love that I feel when I come here. Not judging, not unrighteous judging. Now, if I'm doing something wrong, I definitely expect to be shown that I'm doing something wrong. But the way that you feel with Christ's people, if you're truly following Christ, you will feel that love. You will see that love. One of the stories that I see love and power is when Jesus resurrected Lazarus. If you can see that he absolutely loved Lazarus. That's one of the parts where everybody uses that scripture. Jesus wept. If he's the God of everything, and we know that Jesus is God, for him to cry, for him to weep that somebody's passing, to me that shows how special, not just Lazarus is. I'm sure the Lord loves us all. We know he does because of his actions, what he's done for us. But some people will, if you tell the story of Lazarus, some people are like, well, why did he wait those 4 days? Why did he wait and then let Lazarus die when he could have just stopped him? We know he could have healed him. Even in Scripture it says that. They knew that Jesus could heal him. Martha asked, talks about, they knew that they've seen Jesus' miracles. They knew that he could heal them. They knew that the great works that Yahweh did through him.
But under my understanding,
that happened for a reason. Jesus knew that Lazarus was sick. He knew that he was told,
After Lazarus
was it 3 or 4 days after Lazarus' passing, Jesus came there. Jesus obviously was upset because Scripture tells us that the Lord and Savior cried.
Then that gave Jesus
Then that gave Jesus the opportunity to show his power. Death is one of those
Oh
things
yeah, you
that
can make some,
when you talk to people like, oh yeah, you can make somebody, especially with medical marvels we have now, they can make people blind people see. They can make people with bad hearts replace your whole heart and stuff like that. The medical
one thing we can't do,
stuff now is fantastic.
back from the dead.
One thing we can't do is bring people back from the dead.
When Martha's like,
After 4 days, especially
Lord, you don't want
when
this
Martha's
tomb
like,
open.
surely Lord, you don't want this tomb open. He's been dead for 4 days. Yeah. If anybody's been around, dead animals or, smell a rotting carcass in the back pasture, you know that, not to be crude, but a body is going to smell.
We also know about Israelites
And
and cleanliness and stuff like that.
we also know about Israelites and the cleanliness and stuff like that. There's probably a lot of people that probably got mad at him, but this guy's been dead for 4 days. Now he's alive. Now he's gross. Thanks. Now we got to go clean and do it. Like, he probably focused on the wrong parts of that.
The whole story, John 11:21 through 44.
The whole story, John 11:21 through 44. I won't read the whole thing, but that's know that Lazarus died. The Lord came. The Lord's sick. Told him to move the stone and resurrect him. Told Lazarus to come out. My brain's a little weird. Just imagine, he's all wrapped up. Comes out waddling like a mummy. Probably he doesn't know what's going on. I would be scared if I was dead. Then I came up like just everything's covered in. But Martha, I like this example. Martha thought she knew Jesus' power because she said, you could have made it better. You could have killed us. To her and to all of us, death is the end. In our understanding, we rely on our understanding. Death is the end. Not to Christ, not to Yahweh, not to Him. So, on John 11:40, Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" Absolutely. The glory right there is His power. Is God's wisdom, God's power, God's glory to revive Lazarus. I said this joke to Amanda, but she didn't get it. I guess. So what are the two things in life that are guaranteed? Death and taxes. Thank you. I'm not by myself in that. Death and taxes. Unless you're talking about Yahweh's power. Jesus conquered death there, resurrecting Lazarus, and He conquered death on the cross. So many statements in Scripture and stuff, we know that happened. This might be a tricky one. What can't Yahweh do?
Why can't you lie?
Lie. Why can't He lie?
It's contrary to his nature.
It's contrary to His nature. Yahweh doesn't do things contrary to His nature. And changes is the same. He was always the same, will always be the same. You take a little bit from Jesus' book, He's the truth. So anything He speaks is the truth. The truth cannot become a lie. Yeah.
All his actions are just.
All His actions are just. Only He is all-knowing and all-powerful. I made this analogy. Sometimes I use like that. Yahweh, with life, there's like, there's an economic thing at work I always try to talk to. He says he thinks that he could do better. He had all that power. Man, you have a better conversation. You need to have a better conversation with Yahweh than I do. But I always talk about how it's like a four-dimensional chess that God is always trying to do. He's always got the next 30,000 steps going. But I had a realization, like, yeah, He's doing this 4D chess, but in pieces that make their own moves and decisions. So we don't always move where He wants us to move. We make our own decisions. Sometimes, I think I know better about that. I know I have this thought and process in my head that says that's not a good idea, but I think I know better. And usually we get a nice conviction that's like, yep, you're right. I'll just go back to where you wanted me to.
The reason we talk about always power,
The reason that we talk about Yahweh's power and all the examples that we have, is because that should be able, we should be able to trust in that. Not to rely on our own understanding, because we fall short a lot of our own understanding. To rely on His understanding and His plan. We don't understand a lot of it. I don't try to. I just try to seek knowledge from Him, from His Word. One of the things that I like talking to people that are outside of the church, like, well, you know, why do all these bad things happen to good people? I have no idea. Sometimes, I know, me personally, bad things happen to me because I make poor life decisions. My back hurts because I was in the military for 20 years. I was in helicopter crashes, so that happens. But could He absolutely erase all the wicked in this world? Absolutely could. I wouldn't be here because I'm not good. I try to be, but I'm not. I fall short severely. So that shows me His compassion and His restraint.
And I know I'm not the only one in here, but
And I know I'm not the only one.
we've had our fair share of bad things happen in my family over the years. And when I look back, and Tom and I had this conversation a lot. When we look back on it, we see how God worked through it. We see how He had His hand over the whole time. We always say why, but there's, you see it there, and God has it back. You just have to remember that. He hasn't left us whenever those bad things happen. Sometimes it's just the nature of,
Absolutely.
I truly do believe it's true. Sometimes it's just the nature of nature, and it wasn't that God did it faithfully, but I think He uses us, or I think God works in our lives when we let Him, when we use our choice to let Him work in our lives, to make those work for us.
Absolutely. Especially when you're going through a tough time, it's really hard to see from the inside where His power is, where His hands are helping us, guiding us. Usually, like you were saying, after the fact, with that 2020 vision, like, oh yeah, that was God, He did that. But in the middle of it, and it's really hard to us as Christians, especially me, to, when someone's going through a hard time, like, yes, they need to know that you're going to pray for them, that Yahweh is always there. But we know if someone tells you, especially if someone's like, hey, just stop freaking out, calm down. Okay, cool. Yeah, that never works, ever.
Because that's where the answers are at. God didn't turn away from Christ. Christ didn't turn away from us. There were some things He was going to suffer, had to suffer for us. And it didn't make it any better. And it didn't take away His stress level. Sweat drops of blood.
Yes.
But He had to get through it, and it was for a good that we couldn't have understood at the time, or they didn't understand at the time until later on. And we just got to take confidence in that if we can raise Christ from the dead, He was still with Christ. That's what we have to remember. Through all the suffering, He was with Christ. And we're not going to be greater than Jesus Christ. So we're going to have to go through some struggles, and because of when God has left us more than beforehand. He hadn't left Christ before, He didn't need Christ during, He didn't need Him after. And that's the God we serve before something bad happens to us. So stay before us when it does.
God won't leave you.
He says,
If you seek Him and you find Him, God will not leave you. That's kind of, absolutely. Just finishing up that we know that it's against God's nature. God cannot lie. Some of the truths that He's told us and promises that we put our faith and trust in Jesus, we'll be with Him. And that, knowing His power, knowing what He's done, know what He can do, know what He will do, it should give some comfort to know that He loves you. He wants you to be with Him. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me.